Hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf and welcome to my podcast, Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. Well, in today's podcast, it's part 2 of a series that I'm doing on the understanding the interconnected mind and the different parts of mind. So last week was part 1 and I discussed the different levels of mind, which are the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the non-conscious mind, and then the state of mind, which is unconscious, which is when we're asleep, or unconscious. So non-conscious, the biggest part of you. Subconscious is the portal, which the non-conscious sends messages through, and the conscious mind is only awake when you're awake and has that veto power. So listen to last week's podcast for part 1. And now today I'm going to give you an example of how you can understand that, a really nice visual to help you. I want to stress that the non-conscious mind is filled with wisdom. It is constantly this brilliant driving force that is at our core. It is where we have the answers within. You know how often you get those really cheesy statements that are actually quite true most of the time, where it says, you can find the answer within you. Well, the science is actually, confirms that. There is in the depths of us, we will find those solutions, we will find those answers. And it may not be, come out as this clear writing on the wall kind of thing, but as we explore and get to know what's inside of us, our inner wisdom, we get this clarity of mind that we can work things out. Okay, so here's a great visual to understand this concept. So I want you to imagine that you're flying in a helicopter. And this helicopter is actually a very special helicopter. It's a time capsule. And the reason I say a time capsule is because you can never be just in the moment. You know how often we get told, just focus on the now. Eliminate everything else around you. Just think of the now, now, now. Just be present in this moment. Well, we never actually can just be present in this moment, because this moment is made up of where we've just come from and where we're going in the future. So our mind, the 3 levels, the conscious, the subconscious, and the non-conscious, always work out of time. They always are working, specifically the non-conscious. It's in the present, past, and future all the time, and it's sending that kind of messaging up to the conscious mind through the portal of the subconscious. So when people say be aware of the now or gather awareness of what's happening in the moment, it's basically just the end product of, or it's kind of the culmination of the present, past into the now, but it's informed by the present and the past. And I say that because we never operate out of context. We always have context. And this is so important in terms of mental health. There's always a context for how you're showing up. Okay, so that's just a little bit of background there. So now I want you to imagine that you're in this time capsule. It's flying through the present, past, and future, because as you are experiencing something like me talking to you now, this is stimulating things from the past, existing memories, which is from the past. And that's also making you think of the future. You may not be consciously aware of that, but your non-conscious is always bringing the past into the present and looking at the future. So you're in this time capsule and there's 2 pilots, and you both. You are the messy mind, the actual pilot flying, and you are the co-pilot, which is the wise mind. And the reason that you both is that we operate in both those states at any one time. The wise mind is the dominant default design or structure of who you are as a human. You're filled with wisdom. We just know this from just think of how brilliant the brain is in the last 40 years, how much we've learned about the brain, and just think of a cell and just think of the intelligence in the brain and the body. It's incredible. Okay, so that's just the biological intelligence. The mind intelligence is unbelievable. Think of what humans have invented and created. Think of just what you do in a day. You're brilliant. Your mind, your brain, and your body are filled with wisdom. But we're in life, and life is messy, as we know, because we don't always make the right decisions, and that impacts us, and other people don't make the right decisions, so that impacts us. So there's a messiness component, which also relates to the fact that there's so much unexpected stuff. So that messiness is part of being human. It's okay to be a mess. You've heard me say this a million times if you listen to this podcast. But seriously, this is a podcast where I give you permission to be a mess, because it's part of how you learn and grow. It's part of you being this experimental person. We as humans are very experimental. So the messy one is flying, because the messy one is in life navigating the things that are coming up in the moment. We don't know what's coming up in the next moment. We can predict to a certain extent, but there's all kinds of things that are going to happen today that you and I don't know about. So that's the messiness. We don't know how we're going to feel in the moment when someone says something to us and how we maybe react instead of responding and all these kinds of things. So there's this messiness component that is very, very normal. But in order to keep the messiness from not getting to a point where it's so messy you can't function, we have this wise mind. The problem comes in that the messiness of life can overwhelm us, that we can just be like, just trying to survive through the messiness, and sometimes it doesn't happen, and then you crash because you just the things just don't work properly, you just don't fly the helicopter properly. But when we learn to tune into the message of the wise mind, we actually listen to our co-pilot guiding us that can help us redirect and fix the plane, and if it's nose diving, bring it back up again, and so on. So here you are flying over the forest of your mind. And this forest is this infinite forest because we've had trillions of experiences. Every day we are building life's experiences into us. And what we know about the non-conscious mind is that up to 95% and more of what you're being exposed to is building into you non-consciously. So it's encoding into you. So life all around you that you're not consciously aware of is encoding into you. So experiences, everything that you are immersed in, what you read, what you hear, what's going on around you, what other people are experiencing, what you're picking up, that is 95% of that's building in by your non-conscious mind. Your conscious mind is only consciously aware. We are only consciously aware of around about 5% of that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going into our brain and body and mind, because it always goes in, every experience goes in 3 places that we're not aware of. So your non-conscious mind is looking for the things that we've paid attention to without consciously paying attention to, that we have absorbed in from just this environment, that you walk in and someone's in a bad mood because they've had an experience and you're close to them, so it affects you, but you don't realize it's affecting you. Those are the sorts of things that the non-conscious mind is building in. And if they're not managed, they can increase levels of messiness. So when we understand that, we see that the wise mind is something that we need to listen to. The wise mind helps us to actually be much more attuned to what are we saying and doing? How are we saying and doing that? What are you feeling? What's going on in your body? What is your viewpoint, your mindset, your attitude in this moment? Our wise mind is always kind of directing us to those things. So, back to the analogy, here's this helicopter, here's this messy mind going through life, going through the day, going through the days, the weeks, the months, life, and there's the wise mind. Now we want to listen to our co-pilot. Any pilot will say a co-pilot performs a very, very important role. So the neurocycle system I've developed teaches you how to accept the messiness, but listen to the wise mind. So be the pilot, but listen to the co-pilot. And the neurocycle, for those of you that don't know what it is a system I've developed over 38 years that will help you, based on research, very evidence-based, that will help you manage your mind and direct the neuroplasticity in your brain and the changes you need in your body. So it's in this book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. It's in my neurocycle app. I talk about it on the podcast. And so you can find these wherever you download your apps. And there's neurocycle.app is where you'll find more about it. Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess is available wherever books are sold. And on our website, drleaf.com. Okay, so that's the system for training you to get yourself to listen. So today we specifically want to focus on this analogy of understanding this. So here you are in this helicopter, this time capsule, wise mind, messy mind, flying over this forest, and this forest represents your life. And there's big, medium-sized green trees, there's little green trees, there's big green trees, there's toxic trees, and each of these trees are thoughts made of lots of memories, because as you know, trees are made of lots of branches and roots. So thoughts are made of memories like trees are made of branches and roots, and we'll be doing another podcast on that difference as well. And those represent all your life experiences, right from when you were young, born, all the way through to the age that you're at now. And they keep getting added. And your non-conscious mind is now looking for all of those toxic things to make you aware of them so that you can neurocycle through to deconstruct them and reconstruct them, and it's finding the good ones to enhance them. I spoke about that in the previous podcast. So now with this analogy, here you are flying over, and the wise mind co-pilot says, hey, Caroline, this is an area in your life that needs attention, and starts kind of shining a spotlight, presses a spotlight button and shines on a bunch of toxic thoughts that are big and kind of wild and sending off all these signals. and you have kind of been ignoring them. You've been feeling certain emotions and being triggered by certain things, and there's been certain behavior patterns, and it's disrupting your functioning or your relationships or your creativity or all of the above, or maybe it's making you just get caught up in a point where you're just not functioning like you should, you're not sleep, whatever, different levels of that. So what the co-pilot says is, hey, that is a priority. It's affecting your functioning. And it shines a light and says, okay, let's not fly over this again. Let's not suppress it. Let's not band-aid it. Let's not medicate it away. Let's land the plane. So you listen to the co-pilot and you land the plane at the tree. Now, you don't land the plane on the tree. You land the plane next to the tree. You don't get out alone. You get out with your wise co-pilot. You don't go under the tree. You stand back and observe the tree, and the tree being the thought, the toxic thought, or maybe there's a cluster of them. And you stand back with wisdom, with this brilliant inner wisdom that you have, and you start a process of deconstructing and reconstructing them. And this is all, when this description, as you do this, you are basically, the conscious mind is tuning into the non-conscious mind. The non-conscious mind operates on what we call dynamic self-regulation, which is constant ongoing regulating of all these things and finding these toxic thoughts. Active regulation is the decision to consciously and deliberately land the helicopter, the time capsule helicopter, at this problem and say, okay, I commit to dealing with this. This is disrupting my life in these different ways, and I commit to a 63-day neurocycle. It takes around about 63 days to identify, to find the because of behind how you're functioning, how that's disrupting your life, what the source is, the root system, the origin story, and to reconstruct it. It may take you more. So of those 63 days, the first 21 days is the time that it's going to take you to land the plane and start looking at, you start at the top, from the branches to the processing to the roots. And then it takes another 42 days once you've done that deconstruction process to stabilize the thought, because at the end of day 21, this is reduced significantly, and you've built a new way of functioning, but you still need to stabilize this. So it's going to take another 42 days of practicing that new way of thinking to grow it into a healthy, nice, big, thick, new thought that when you're in that situation, this is now what comes up, not the old way of functioning. And the non-conscious mind, that's what one of the main jobs that it's doing, is enabling you to do that. So it's landing the plane, landing the helicopter, I should say, and looking at this and starting a process. And to add to that visual, it's like you bring a spade out and you are now, and maybe a step ladder, so that you can climb up the step ladder and look at the branches, because the branches are how you've interpreted. It's the first thing that you see. It's where all the warning signals are. Behind the warning signals, there's all this data. And then how did you get there? You're going to, get off the ladder and look down the tree trunk, and then you're just going to take a spade, a shovel, and you're going to start moving the sand to find the rotten part of the weed, so that you can put some healing food on to heal those, reconstruct those roots, so that you can now grow a healthy new thought. Now, having said that, whatever's happened to you, which is producing these warning signals, which basically became that thought that produced the warning signals, as you land the helicopter and start doing this whole gardening thing, you will never get rid of your story, because your story is what's happened to you. But you will change by putting the healing on those, healing food on the plant food on the roots. You're reconstructing and regrowing, so that this ugly toxic thing becomes tiny and loses its power, and this is what dominates. Notice how I'm squishing that in there. This is small, so this is what dominates, and this becomes our story, that now we control it. It doesn't control us. So join me next time for another pearl of wisdom. Hope you enjoyed this. Look forward to seeing you next time.